For the next few minutes, I want you to imagine something most people never stop to consider, that the voice you hear in your own mind, the one that narrates your day, that reacts to your mistakes, that whispers when you're alone, is shaping every part of your life, not just how you feel, but what you believe you're capable of. That voice isn't just background noise, it's your compass. It's how you interpret the world. And the truth is, it's powerful enough to either guide you forward or keep you stuck. Now, what if I told you that most of us, most of the time, are letting that voice go unchecked, like a wild current pulling us without direction, often without kindness? We say things to ourselves we wouldn't dare say to someone we care about. Think about that for a moment. If a friend came to you, discouraged after failing at something, would you tell them they're pathetic? Would you roll your eyes and say, "You always mess things up"? Of course not. You'd tell them it's okay. You'd remind them of what they've done right. You'd help them see a way forward. But how often do we do that for ourselves? We live in a culture that rewards performance, perfection, and pressure. So when we fall short, the automatic response is usually self-criticism. And sure, it might feel like we're holding ourselves accountable, but there's a difference between accountability and emotional self-harm. The language we use with ourselves matters. It writes our internal script. And the scary part is that script becomes prophecy. When you tell yourself you're not good enough, your brain starts looking for proof. It filters your experiences through that belief. You walk into a room already convinced you don't belong, and suddenly every silence feels like rejection. Every sideways glance confirms the story you've already written. They don't see me. I'm not enough. And the worst part? You start behaving in ways that reflect that belief. You shrink, you hesitate, you avoid, all because of a voice inside that's never been corrected. But here's the hope, and it's real, grounded, and incredibly practical. You can change the voice. Not with magic, not overnight, but through deliberate, conscious repetition. That's the power of talking to yourself differently for 21 days, for 3 weeks, for long enough to form a new pattern. When you interrupt the old voice and introduce a new one, something shifts, not just in how you feel, but in how you act, and ultimately in what becomes possible for you. You might wonder, why 21 days? Because your brain, as flexible and adaptable as it is, needs consistency to build a new habit. Neural pathways don't change just because you read a quote or repeat an affirmation once. They change when you live a new thought over and over again until it feels more true than the old one ever did. So, start simply. Talk to yourself the way you talk to someone you believe in. That's the core. Not fake positivity, not ignoring real issues, but choosing to use words that build you up rather than tear you down. The words you speak to yourself become the foundation of your actions. Tell yourself, "I can figure this out," and suddenly you approach problems with curiosity instead of fear. Tell yourself, "I've made mistakes, but I'm learning," and you begin to feel growth instead of shame. The mind responds to direction, and your voice is the one giving it. Let's go deeper for a second. Every belief you have about yourself was installed at some point, by family, by culture, by experience, and most of those beliefs weren't consciously chosen. They were absorbed. So if you grew up being criticized, you might have internalized that voice as your own. If you were praised only for achievements, you might now equate failure with worthlessness. These beliefs feel like truth because they've been reinforced for years. But beliefs aren't facts. They're just thoughts you've repeated enough to feel real. So what happens when you start repeating a new thought? What happens when, for 21 days, you decide to speak to yourself like someone worthy of respect? Like someone in progress, not in pieces? What happens when every time the old voice says, "You always mess this up," you pause and say, "No, I'm learning how to get it right"? You begin to reclaim your narrative. Because here's the thing. The world is loud. It will tell you who to be and how to think. But your inner voice, that's where your power lives. That's where your real life is happening, in the unseen space between experience and interpretation. You can't always control what happens around you, but you can shape how you speak to yourself about it. And when that inner dialogue is grounded in strength, compassion, and truth, everything around you begins to shift. And no, this isn't about delusion. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about being rooted in something deeper than self-judgment. It's about creating a home within yourself that's safe, especially when the world isn't. Because if your own mind is a place of cruelty, you have no refuge. But if your inner voice becomes your ally, your steady, encouraging guide, then you carry peace with you wherever you go. So today I'm inviting you to try something radical and simple at the same time. For the next 21 days, speak to yourself as if you matter. Because you do. When you stumble, speak kindly. When you succeed, celebrate. When you're lost, reassure yourself. When you're overwhelmed, say, one step at a time, I've got this. These aren't just words, they're instructions to your brain. They're signals that you're changing course. Talk to yourself like someone who's worth showing up for, because that's who you are. We are creatures of habit. Every thought we think, every feeling we revisit, every sentence we say to ourselves becomes part of the architecture of our mind. Nothing we repeat is wasted. And this is not some poetic metaphor, it's biology. The brain is built to adapt to whatever we give it most consistently. Think of it like a path through a forest. The more you walk it, the clearer it gets. Eventually, it becomes the default route. Your thoughts work the same way. When you talk to yourself in a certain way over and over again, whether it's harsh criticism, quiet doubt, or anxious prediction, your brain begins to treat that pattern as normal. It becomes the automatic setting. And most of us are living inside the patterns we never consciously chose. We're on autopilot, thinking the same thoughts day after day, most of which we didn't create deliberately. That's where change becomes powerful. Because when you bring awareness to the pattern, you can begin to build a new one. You can decide this voice doesn't serve me anymore and choose to walk a new path. That's what the next 21 days are about. Repetition, not perfection. There's nothing glamorous about it, just the quiet daily work of replacing one way of speaking to yourself with another. One sentence at a time. That's how we rewire the brain. You see, real transformation isn't loud. It doesn't always come with lightning strikes or sudden breakthroughs. Most of the time, it's a slow shift that only becomes noticeable in hindsight. You start by catching yourself when the old voice creeps in. Then you begin replacing it with something new. Then, without even realizing it, one day the new voice speaks first. You might doubt it at first. You might think, this is silly or it won't make a difference. That's just the old voice trying to survive. But I promise you, if you stay with it, if you commit to it, even imperfectly, your inner world will begin to feel different, lighter, clearer, more yours. Let's pause here and be honest. You've probably already tried to change how you think before. Maybe it didn't stick. Maybe you fell back into old habits. That doesn't mean you failed. It means your brain did what it's wired to do. Fall back to the most familiar route. But here's the beauty of it. Just as you once trained your mind to doubt, fear, or criticize, you can train it to support, encourage, and focus. Your brain doesn't care if a thought is helpful or hurtful. It just follows the blueprint you give it most often. This is where repetition becomes sacred. You're not trying to force a new voice into being through sheer willpower. You're inviting it in over time, gently and deliberately. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You water it, you expose it to light, and you trust the process. That's what your new inner voice needs. It needs you to show up daily with your words, even when you don't feel like it, even when it feels like nothing is changing. There's a kind of discipline in that. Not the kind that punishes or pushes, but the kind that commits. You don't have to get it right every time. You don't have to believe every new affirmation immediately. You just have to keep returning to it. Keep saying it. Keep planting the thought, because the repetition is the rewiring. And the more you do it, the more your brain begins to accept it as normal. Let's make this practical. Start by choosing a few simple phrases. Ones that speak to the parts of you that feel unheard or unsure. Maybe something like, I can handle this, or I'm doing better than I think. Maybe, I'm allowed to take up space. Keep it short, keep it true, and say it daily. Say it out loud if you can. Write it down. Whisper it to yourself when you wake up. Repeat it in the mirror. You're not trying to convince yourself of a lie. You're creating the conditions for a new truth to grow. And don't expect fireworks on day one. You might not feel anything at first. That's okay. Think of it like strengthening a muscle. You wouldn't expect to lift a heavy weight after just one workout. The same goes for your thoughts. The first few days the old voice will probably push back hard. It'll tell you this won't work. It'll tell you to quit. That's just resistance. It's part of the process. Don't let it stop you. Let it signal that you're getting close to something worth changing. The 21-day window isn't a magic number. It's just long enough to disrupt the default, long enough to give the new voice space to speak. And once it starts showing up on its own, you'll know something has shifted. That moment when you face a challenge and, instead of panicking, you hear yourself say, "I can handle this." That's the reward. That's what we're after. And it's closer than you think. You see, most people live their entire lives never questioning the voice they hear inside. They assume it's them, but it's not. It's a mixture of influences: parents, culture, fear, trauma. And the moment you realize that, you become free to ask, what kind of voice do I want guiding me instead? That question is the beginning of liberation. And answering it is a daily act of self-respect. So I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to fake joy or suppress your struggle. I'm simply asking you to be intentional, to choose words that make space for growth, to repeat them not because they're easy, but because they matter. The repetition is what makes them real. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, steadily, unshakably real. And if you stay with it, if you talk to yourself like someone who deserves gentleness and strength for 21 days, you'll find that the old path starts to fade. The new one, once overgrown and unfamiliar, becomes a road you can walk with trust, and eventually it becomes the only one you hear, because what you repeat, you become. There's something subtle yet deeply damaging that most people carry with them every single day. It's not always loud. It doesn't always scream or announce itself. In fact, it's often quiet. So quiet that we stop noticing it altogether. But it's there, underneath every decision, every hesitation, every moment we pull back instead of stepping forward. It's the voice of our own inner critic. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that says, "Why would they listen to you?" or "You should have done better." The voice that whispers, "You're too much," or sometimes "You're not enough." That voice is a master of disguise. It'll pretend to be helpful. It'll sound like it's just keeping you humble or protecting you from failure. But the truth is, most of the time it's doing damage. It's keeping you small. And it's doing it in your own words. That's why we need to talk about how we handle self-criticism. Because it isn't just a habit. It's a pattern of internal punishment that we've often learned from the outside world and made our own. We don't start out criticizing ourselves. No child looks in the mirror and thinks they aren't good enough. That voice is picked up piece by piece through experiences, expectations, and pain. And over time, it becomes internalized, it becomes automatic. But just because it's automatic doesn't mean it's accurate. And just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's truth. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about denying your mistakes or pretending everything you do is perfect. That's not strength, that's just another kind of denial. What I'm talking about is learning to speak to yourself with constructive affirmation. The kind of inner language that builds, guides, and grows you instead of breaking you down. So, let's look at the difference. Self-criticism says, "I failed, so I'm a failure." Constructive affirmation says, "That didn't go the way I hoped, but now I know what to try differently." One leads to shame and paralysis. The other leads to learning and movement. And the only difference between the two is how you talk to yourself in the moment. You can still hold yourself accountable. You can still want better, aim higher, do more, but you don't have to destroy yourself to get there. In fact, you'll get there faster and more sustainably if your internal voice is supportive rather than punishing. People don't thrive under cruelty, not from others, and not from themselves. Think about someone in your life who inspired you to grow, someone who believed in you even when you doubted yourself. Or what was it about them? Most likely, it was the way they made you feel safe, even when you were being challenged. They helped you see possibility, not just your flaws. Now imagine if you became that voice for yourself, not just once in a while, but consistently, especially in the moments where you fall short. That's the shift we're making over these 21 days. We're not ignoring the hard moments, we're reframing them. We're replacing judgment with curiosity. And more than anything, we're choosing to treat ourselves like someone worth helping, not punishing. You can start by noticing when the old voice appears. It usually shows up when things go wrong. You forget something important, you miss a deadline, you say the wrong thing in a conversation, and before you even have a chance to process it, the voice jumps in. You always do this. Why can't you get it together? That voice is so quick, so rehearsed, that you barely catch it. But what if in that exact moment you stopped and said, hold on, that's not helpful. What do I need to hear right now that is? Maybe what you need to hear is, it's okay, everyone makes mistakes. Or, you're under a lot of pressure. Take a breath. Maybe it's just, this one moment doesn't define you. These phrases might feel soft at first, maybe even unearned, but that's because you're not used to them yet. That doesn't mean they're false, it just means they're new. And here's the thing, affirming yourself in difficult moments doesn't mean you're lowering your standards. It means you're creating an environment where growth is possible. Imagine a child learning to walk. If they fell and you shouted, what's wrong with you? You should have gotten that right. How long would they keep trying? Probably not long. But if you said, that's okay, get back up, you're learning, they try again. Why? Because the tone is safe, because they're encouraged, not condemned. You need that same kind of space within yourself. Because growth, real, lasting growth, requires safety. It requires compassion, not indulgence. Compassion. The ability to see yourself clearly and still choose to support yourself. Not because you've earned it, but because you're human, because you're trying, because you deserve the same grace you'd offer to someone you love. Now, I know for some of you, this is deeply unfamiliar. Maybe the voice of the inner critic is all you've ever known. Maybe you think it's the reason you've made it as far as you have. And yes, some people do get far by pushing themselves harshly, but they rarely feel peace. They live in a constant state of tension, waiting to be proven wrong, afraid of what silence might bring. That's not strength, that's survival. What we're aiming for here is something better than survival. We're aiming for wholeness. And to get there, we need a new voice, one that says, you can be honest and still be kind. One that says you don't have to earn love, you are worthy of it. One that says you're allowed to grow without tearing yourself down first. This shift doesn't happen all at once. You won't wake up tomorrow with a completely new mindset. But if you make this choice every day for 21 days, you will start to feel the change. You'll notice the silence between the critical thoughts getting longer. You'll catch yourself offering reassurance instead of rebuke. And over time, your mind will begin to feel like a place you can actually rest in, instead of a battlefield. It begins with catching the old patterns, then replacing them, then repeating the replacement until it becomes your new normal. You don't need grand speeches. You need simple, solid truths, spoken with intention and spoken often. Truths like, I'm allowed to get it wrong and still be good. I can learn from this and that's enough. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. Say them daily, say them especially when the critic shows up, not because you're trying to drown it out with noise, but because you're teaching it something new. You're teaching yourself what love sounds like when it comes from within. And when you do that day after day, moment after moment, you stop being your own enemy. You become your first source of strength. Most people walk through life responding to the world as if it's in control of how they feel. They treat their emotions like weather patterns, something that just happens to them. One moment they're calm, the next they're anxious, irritated, overwhelmed, and they assume, well, that's just how I am today. But what if I told you that much of that emotional landscape is shaped not by what's happening outside of you, but by the way you're speaking to yourself inside? You see, every emotion you feel is preceded by a thought, not always a loud, obvious one. Sometimes it's just a subtle phrase you mutter in your mind without even noticing. But it's there, and it's shaping how you feel. Say to yourself, I'm never going to get through this, and what follows? Tension, fear, defeat. Now say instead, I've faced worse and survived, and something shifts. You may still feel uneasy, but now there's a thread of strength in it. This is where emotional self-regulation begins, not by suppressing how you feel, but by understanding that the dialogue you allow in your mind has immense power to either escalate your pain or anchor your peace. And the beauty of it is this, it's not about being fake. It's not about plastering a smile over real frustration. It's about responding to yourself in a way that creates stability, not chaos. Think of a moment when you felt overwhelmed, like everything was too much. What did you say to yourself in that moment? Did you tell yourself you were falling apart, that you were failing, that no one cared or noticed? Those words aren't neutral. They don't just describe the emotion, they deepen it. And the longer you keep that kind of dialogue going, the more intense the emotion becomes. But the moment you interrupt it, even slightly, with a different message, the spiral starts to slow. That interruption is powerful. It doesn't mean pretending you're okay when you're not. It means creating a pause between the feeling and the reaction, a breath, a space. And in that space, you introduce a new sentence, one that helps you feel safe inside yourself again. Imagine someone close to you is panicking. What do? Do you join them in their panic? Or do you steady your voice, offer reassurance, remind them they're not alone? That's what you must learn to do for yourself, because in the end, no one spends more time with you than you. No one's words reach you more consistently than your own. This is where the discipline of emotional dialogue begins. When you feel anger rise, you can say, "This is valid, but I choose how I respond." When you feel sadness weigh on you, you can say, "This hurts, but it's not forever." When anxiety grips you, you can whisper, "I am safe in this moment. I've survived every moment before now." These aren't affirmations meant to erase reality. They're tools, anchors, lifelines that you throw to yourself when the emotional current starts pulling you under. And the more you use them, the more natural they become. Over time, your emotional reactions begin to change, not because life becomes easier, but because your relationship with yourself becomes more stable. You begin to trust your own presence. You know that no matter what you're feeling, you won't abandon yourself. That's what emotional self-regulation really is. It's not control. It's commitment. A commitment to be your own safe place, especially when things get loud and messy. Most people try to manage their emotions by changing the world around them. They move cities, end relationships, shift jobs, all hoping that their inner state will follow. But no matter where you go, you take your thoughts with you. And if the voice in your mind still speaks to you with chaos, criticism, or fear, then peace will always feel one step out of reach. But if you can start to respond to yourself with steady, kind, grounded words, even when everything outside of you is uncertain, then suddenly peace isn't something you have to chase. It becomes something you create. And that creation begins in the smallest of moments. You wake up and already feel the weight of the day pressing on your chest. Instead of diving into your phone or rushing through the routine, you pause. You say, "I have time. I don't have to solve everything right now." And already you've given yourself space to breathe. You face criticism at work or disappointment in a conversation, and the first instinct might be to spiral into thoughts of inadequacy or failure. But instead you catch it. You say, "That hurt, but I am still capable. I still matter." That shift doesn't erase the sting, but it stops it from becoming a story of self-destruction. You get overwhelmed, angry, frustrated, you want to explode, but instead you find the pause. You remind yourself, "I can feel this without letting it guide me." That's the kind of power that changes everything. Not because you've shut your emotions off, but because you've learned how to walk with them instead of being dragged by them. And this takes practice. That's why I invite you to spend the next 21 days not just speaking kindly to yourself, but also speaking wisely. When your emotions rise, treat them like signals, not enemies, and respond to those signals with words that ground you, support you, and lead you back to center. Ask yourself again and again, what do I need to hear right now that would help me feel safe inside myself? And then give yourself that message. Speak to the fear with truth. Speak to the anger with presence. Speak to the sorrow with gentleness. And let this become a habit, because emotions will always come and go. Life will always shift and surprise and challenge you. But the words you choose in those moments, that's the part you control. That's the part that builds your resilience from the inside out. You don't need to feel perfect to speak to yourself with stability. You just need to practice. Every time you do, you build a deeper trust in yourself. You begin to see that you can hold space for any feeling without being consumed by it. You learn that the tone you use with yourself can change the entire trajectory of a difficult moment. That's what emotional self-regulation really is, not suppression, not denial, but conscious dialogue. The kind that creates calm in the middle of chaos. Because when your inner voice becomes your anchor, no storm can pull you too far away from yourself. We come now to a simple truth that we often forget, especially in the midst of our own chaos, our own striving, our own attempts to be better, do more, and hold it all together. And that truth is this: you are not just someone trying to get somewhere. You are someone becoming. Every single day, through your choices, through your thoughts, through the words you say to yourself when no one is listening, you are becoming someone. The question is who? For many people, self-talk is merely reactive. They say what they feel. If they're tired, the voice inside says, I can't do this. If they're anxious, it says, everything's falling apart. If they feel unworthy, the voice says, of course this is happening to me, I never get it right. But few stop to realize that this inner monologue isn't just reflecting who they are. It's shaping who they become. The voice you use when you speak to yourself becomes the internal architecture of your identity. Speak to yourself with fear long enough, and you will begin to live cautiously. Speak to yourself with shame, and you will learn to shrink. Speak to yourself with doubt, and you will sabotage your own potential before it even has the chance to prove itself. But when you speak to yourself with vision, when you consistently affirm the person you are becoming, everything begins to change. Because that voice starts building a life that aligns with belief instead of limitation. This is not about magical thinking. This is about consistent direction. Every day you are programming your subconscious with cues. This is who I am. This is what I expect. This is what's possible for me. And over time, your actions follow. So the question you must ask yourself is not simply, how do I feel today? The question must be, what kind of person do I want to become? And what does that version of me sound like? If you want to become more confident, you must begin speaking to yourself like someone who is confident. Not after you achieve the goal, not when the doubt disappears. Now, speak it now before you see it, and you will start to walk in alignment with it. The words won't feel true at first. That's normal, because you're not reciting your current reality. You're declaring your direction. And that declaration, repeated over time, creates the internal momentum that builds the external change. It's like setting a course. If you tell your internal compass, I'm always behind, I'm never good enough, then that's the direction it will continue to guide you. But if you begin instead with, I'm growing, I'm learning, I am capable of change, you start moving differently. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And intention is everything. It's easy to underestimate the power of small daily phrases. They seem insignificant, like whispers against the roar of circumstance. But over time, those whispers reshape you. They rewire your reactions. They teach your nervous system to expect safety instead of threat. They create emotional resilience because you begin to know, at your core, that you are with yourself, not against yourself, not passively observing your life, not just surviving, but becoming. There's something deeply sacred about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know that your voice is one you can trust, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've made a commitment to speak from your potential, not your panic, a commitment to affirm who you are becoming even on the days you fall short, especially on those days, because transformation doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through consistency. It happens when you choose again and again to align your inner voice with your deeper truth. Let me ask you this. If someone followed you around and repeated everything you said to yourself out loud, would you feel uplifted or diminished? Or would you trust that person with your dreams, your insecurities, your growth? If the answer is no, then something must change. Not out of guilt, not out of shame, but out of realization that you deserve better than the voice of your fears. You deserve the voice of your future. So speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you believe in. When you fail, don't say, I'm a failure. Say, this is part of the process. I'm learning. I'm adjusting. I'm growing stronger. When you're scared, don't say, I can't handle this. Say, this is hard, and I will move through it one step at a time. When you're tired, don't say, I'm lazy, I'm weak. Say, I need rest. I'm allowed to slow down and recover. These are not just nicer words. They are constructive truths, phrases that hold both honesty and hope. The person you are becoming needs a voice that can guide them, and that voice must come from within. You can't always rely on the world to validate your progress. You can't wait for the perfect circumstances to feel encouraged. You must learn to cultivate that encouragement internally. That is what makes the difference between temporary motivation and lifelong transformation. And the beautiful part is, you don't need to be anyone else. You don't need to pretend to be fearless or flawless. You just need to speak in alignment with who you know you are deep down. Even if the surface hasn't caught up yet, speak it anyway. You are not lying to yourself when you affirm your potential. You are remembering it. You are naming what has always been there, even if it has been buried under fear, doubt, or years of inner criticism. And so I invite you, just for these 21 days, to make this practice sacred. Let every internal phrase be a step toward the person you are becoming. Let every thought you speak inwardly reflect your capacity for growth. Write it, say it, repeat it until it becomes your native tongue. Let it guide your mornings and recalibrate your nights. Let it be the soundtrack of your transformation. Because the most powerful shifts in life do not come from the world finally seeing you. They come from you seeing yourself. From you deciding to meet yourself each day with words that align with the vision you carry, even if that vision still feels distant. You bridge that distance one phrase at a time, and you do it not by accident, but by intention. This is how we become who we were always meant to be, by talking to ourselves like we're already on the way there.